welcome to the 32nd episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. We do have a guest we've had before. I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself one more time.
My name's Nolan Kilday. I'm a CFI at Thrust, and I've been working here since September.
Yes, thank you, Nolan, for joining us once more. It hasn't been that long since we've had you join the podcast. You're a CFI. You're a little bit newer to it, right? But it seems like you're getting into your role pretty deeply now. So I'm excited to kind of talk a little bit how that process has been going for you. Can you tell me what are some of the things they have you working on as a CFI in terms of ratings?
So I'm teaching private, commercial, instrument, and CFII.
Okay, private, commercial, CFI, and instrument, right?
And instrument.
Gotcha. Are there out of those four, or some of those, have you kind of spent more time with some of those rather than the others?
CFII and instrument
Mm-hmm.
were the two main that I first originally got assigned, and then I just recently got assigned private and commercial.
Okay, cool. So that means that you're a primary CFI. When you say assigned, that means you're a primary CFI for students?
For students in that
Gotcha.
category.
And that just kind of, is there like a certain number of students someone tends to get assigned?
I've been getting like four to five students,
Mhm.
and that's usually, sometimes it can go up to 6.
Mhm.
Just depends on your schedule and if they need a primary or not.
But you're working as a pilot. Did that feel like? Do you get a sense of accomplishment from that?
It's rewarding. It's rewarding because you go from not knowing how to fly
Uh-huh.
to knowing how to fly, and then going to getting paid to fly.
And then even teaching people.
Exactly, and that's really rewarding when you get to teach somebody where they don't know what they're doing, and then they finally get their rating and their
Mhm.
certification.
Okay. Well, then, can you remind us too what you did before this? Were you going to school? Were you working another job?
I was going to school for a little bit,
Mhm.
and then also I was working jobs, had a construction company, and doing all that.
Mm,
So that was kind of my main source of income, and then I was like, you know what, I need to go to college, at least get my degree in something,
right.
and it just wasn't for me.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess what I'm wondering is how did it feel different than when you were going to school when you tried out getting a degree through like a university or something like that?
At a university, they don't care
Mm,
really, you're a number.
mm,
Versus here, it's like everybody's kind of talking to you. Everybody's like, "Hey, are you doing the right thing?
right.
Is there anything that I can do to help you?" Versus, you have 500 students and
Yeah.
one professor. They don't care if you come or not.
Yeah.
They get paid the same regardless.
Oh, I didn't even think about it that way because I did go. I did the same thing, right? I
Hmm.
started to go to school and then I kind of transitioned into doing my own thing, or choosing something different. I felt that way though. It was all on me, which is cool and all because it is always all on you. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, even flight training is all on you. Uh, but do you feel like that it changes your motivation? Like you were just saying a second ago, you have to like, you kind of have to keep going no matter what. There's ups and downs.
Hmm.
That's a little easier to do probably in a situation like this. No.
Right, because you have that support crew to help you out
Mm.
and keep getting you the stuff that you need. Versus in college, it kind of felt like, if you fall behind, you can only get yourself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it felt like in college. I was there was a couple times I was like, man, I don't know how I'm gonna get out of this. I'm so behind. And then they say you're supposed to like drop out of a class so it doesn't count against you. And I was always too stubborn too. I was like, no, I'm gonna catch
No.
up, and then I wouldn't. And then, anyways, I do better in situations like I hear students talk about at the school where you're really plugged in because we have a serious curriculum, a
Yep.
format, a structure.
Yep.
So yeah, but so now that you're CFI, you're working on things like instrument and CFII a lot so far. Uh, are you learning things there? Or are you feeling confident in teaching those things?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's sometimes they'll ask me a question and I might not know it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but instead of just saying, "Oh, I don't know the answer, go find it."
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling them, "Hey, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go and ask somebody who's higher, somebody who might have that question already asked,"
Mm-hmm.
and then they did their research on it. If I wasn't prepared for that question.
I feel like I learn better by having to do things that way myself.
Hmm.
If I were like a CFI and I had to like supply information, I learn better by having to figure it out in that kind of way and then
Hmm.
regurgitate it and teach it and then really know it. It's cool that you guys work together so much as CFIs. What kind of things do y'all do to work together as a team?
So we have like these team meetings, these
Mm-hmm.
teams, and so each chief is assigned a group of a group of instructors, and
Mm-hmm.
then we'll kind of just talk about everything. Like, hey, is this student doing all right? How's how's your students as an instructor? Is there anything that got brought up that we need to fix?
Mhm.
And so every chief has a group of instructors,
Okay.
and so that they have a team meeting once a month.
I didn't fully understand that really. So that's cool to know that the Chiefs are kind of like overseeing some of that
Yeah.
and making sure that everything's going well. Okay, is there any specific questions that you can remember any of your students so far having that you saw a light bulb go off on?
So at first he didn't know what a hold was,
Hmm.
and so I kind of explained it why we do it,
Hmm. Can
and
you explain that?
the reasons why we would do a hold is
Hmm.
because we're waiting for weather to clear up at an airport. Sometimes there might be something wrong with the runway where you have to hold in your position.
Mm.
And instead of like in your car, instead of just pressing on the brake, we don't really have that in the sky. So we basically, it's just a protected area for you to stay in that same place until something clears up or when it's safe for you to go.
Okay, gotcha. And then so the student you were with at the time didn't quite understand what a hold was or why you would do it.
Right.
And then so were they asked to hold at that time?
I was, because an instrument,
Hmm.
you have to do holds, and
Yeah.
same thing with being current, you have to at least do a hold.
Hmm.
And so it's a required task,
Hmm.
and he just kind of didn't get it at first, and then after I kind of explained it and stuff,
Hmm.
and then at Addison there was something wrong with the runway. There was a Pilatus
Hmm.
lost a tire
Oh.
on the runway, and
Oh.
so we had to hold because we couldn't go land right away.
Yeah.
We couldn't go land, so we had to hold, and he was like, "Oh, I see. I kind of see why
Why?
we have to hold, because we can't just go and land with another aircraft on the runway."
Right, and at that moment, when he realized, like, the importance of it, um, had you guys already worked on it, or were you kinda performing and
We
demonstrating?
were we were working on it, and we were slowly kind of getting there. He was understanding it a little bit, still kind of why do we need to? How do I do it?
Mhm.
And then that happened. It was like a perfect teaching moment.
Could you maybe name each one and kinda tell me about how you would know which one you need to do?
So
Mhm,
there's a published hold and then a non-published hold.
mhm,
But there's three entries: direct, teardrop, and parallel.
okay.
So it's just depending on where you are
Mhm,
compared to the actual fix or where you need to enter. So direct is 180,
mhm,
teardrop is 70 degrees,
mhm,
and parallel is 110, depending on where you are. It's makes sense whenever you draw it out and you
mhm,
kind of draw a line through the fix.
mhm,
And hey, if you're on this side of it, you'll if you're on that 180-degree side, you'll go in and just do a direct.
mhm.
Versus if you're in that 70-degree quadrant, you'll do a teardrop entry. Same thing with the 110.
Okay, gotcha, and then you said that the 2 because there's the entries, and then there's the 2 different kinds, the
Published and non-published.
right, and what's the difference there?
So non-published is basically like, hey, I want you to hold on this VOR.
Mhm.
Versus published, it's like, hey, it's actually depicted and everything.
Oh, okay.
So shooting approaches, sometimes like the miss procedure will be
Mhm.
like, hey, hold here.
Oh,
That would be
okay.
a published hold.
Okay, gotcha. I see what you're saying. And then so we're at the Addison airport. Is I feel like there's a lot to maneuver at the Addison airport. It's not that small of an airport. I mean, it's pretty busy.
Yeah.
Is it 2 runways over here?
We have one.
One runway on this one, and it's a busy airport to have one runway.
Rare.
It seems like. I mean, I see the hangars, and I've driven all around the airport before. It's big. So what I'm wondering is doing things like a hold or certain types of entries or certain types of landings. The fact that we have to go about 30 minutes out just for training areas. Um, and then there's comms, right? Is there benefits you think come from practicing holds and things like that at an airport like this?
Yeah. Um, I love this place because we get to actually talk to approach and
Hmm.
uh talk to center, and
Mm.
basically we have to get sometimes we'll have to get Bravo clearance and everything. Versus if we go out east where it's just class Echo, class Golf,
Mm.
it's kind of like, hey, it's non-towered, it's pretty simple. Versus here, it's like, okay, I'm already going to be talking to approach
Hmm.
whenever I go to the airlines
Hmm.
and whenever I go start flying more advanced aircrafts.
Hmm.
So it's a good learning moment because now I already have that confidence going in
Right.
to my next job.
I guess the reason I ask is because I'd like to point out that like you said, it's can seem a little bit more difficult, but you get more out of it that way, right? Um, I'm imagining being a new pilot, and having to communicate in ways that I don't know how to
Mhm.
communicate. I'm really slow to pick up the lingo of things when I
Yeah.
get into like maybe a new job or I learn something new. Although I'm a talker, I'll get really nervous,
Yeah.
and I think it seems pretty common.
You have to be um, very, very clear, very advised with what you're going to be doing. Especially because we have one taxiway and we
Yeah,
have 9 hotspots because our runway and taxiway are kind of too close to each other.
yeah,
So with that being said,
yeah.
we have to not only if we're on the taxiway, we also have to be worried about traffic on the runway.
Hmm.
Sometimes we'll have to hold and wait for that traffic to clear by. Sometimes we'll have to go off the taxiway and go into, Sierra Tango, do a 180 there, hold short of taxiway Alpha there.
Hmm.
Just being with the traffic and how much comes into it, you just have to be more wide awake and
Hmm.
be ready for what can happen.
It's probably easier to learn instrument at an airport you've already flown at,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to imagine learning, like actually using the skills you learn in instrument at an airport you've never been to.
Yep.
That's where you really get put to the test,
Yeah.
right?
I have a student right now.
Yeah.
He was in last CTA's class,
Hmm.
and he didn't do his private here. He went and did it in Ohio,
Hmm.
and so now it's like he's kind of at first he was all over the place because he was like he's not familiar with the place, which is understandable.
Right.
But now as we're going through instrument, he's kind of like, okay, I know where I'm at without even seeing where.
I'm wondering about what reasons you would have to utilize your instrument skills at a different airport while you're a student. Because most of the time you're going to be at the same airport, right?
Right.
But like maybe during your cross country or something like
For
that,
cross
is that a time
country.
when you have to use instrument skills?
Yep.
Mhm.
We went down to Waco the other day with my
Mhm.
student,
Mhm.
and visibility didn't allow us to get down, so we had to shoot an instrument approach.
Mhm.
And so because of that, he was able to use his skills from the airports that he's familiar with
Mhm.
versus an airport that he's never been to.
Right. What are the key tools and techniques to understanding what you're doing when you're an instrument when you're approaching a airport that you've never been to that you would
So
rely on?
it's kind of all that stuff is kind of in your pre-flight planning. Like, hey, I need to get familiar with the airport before you even go.
Okay.
You want to do all this stuff on the ground, right? So it's kind of the pre-flight planning
Mhm.
and making sure, hey, I'm familiar with it, what approach you're going to shoot, and depending on the approach, you have to make sure you're on the right data. Um, you have to make sure that you brief the approach plate, make sure your minimums are in. All that will go through like the nice ATM
Mhm.
to notify
Yeah.
ATC kind of, hey, this is we're here,
Mhm.
and then they'll give you an approach, or you can request the approach.
Mhm. Why is cross country part of the training for the ratings? I mean,
Well,
I know it's kind of speculation. I
yeah,
guess no one consulted with you,
one
but
it's
I'm curious about what you think.
I enjoy it
Yeah.
because we're doing all these maneuvers, we're doing all this stuff, and
Mhm.
it's very easy to lose track of what actual flying is, right?
Mhm.
Why did we get into this, right?
Mm.
People don't get into it to be like, oh, I want to do steep turns, or oh, I want to do slow flight and all that.
Yeah.
No, they want to go from place to place, and
Yeah.
it's kind of, hey, this is what we're actually doing. This is why we joined aviation in the first place, is because we want
Mm.
to eventually be able to just fly from airport to airport and go have lunch somewhere or go
Yeah.
have lunch somewhere else, down in Austin or
Yeah.
other places. And so it's kind of rewarding, and it's kind of like, hey, just remember, like, this is why you even joined
Mm.
in the first place.
I didn't look at it that way. I hadn't thought about it
Mhm.
that way. I mean, again, I'm still learning a lot of things, but I didn't. I wouldn't have thought to have looked at it in a way that says, "Hey, you're working up to do your cross country because that's where all everything applies."
Mhm.
You get to practice. You're like zooming out a little
Yep.
bit, right? Because you're really hyper focused on small little details
Yeah.
here and there, here maneuver, landing, whatever, slow flight, and then it's like, okay, we did all the little technical wax on, wax off
Yep.
training, right? And then let's apply. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what that moment is. It seems
Yeah.
like.
It's still like a training flight,
Hmm.
and it's still good to like still teach during it and
Hmm.
still. But now instead of focusing on like steep turns or all your actual maneuvers, right now we're going out there. One, it's a requirement that we have to do, but
Right.
also we're teaching. There's other stuff that you can do in that plane and
Hmm.
talk about it. that's not really as focused as doing a maneuver
Okay.
versus like doing a VOR check, right?
Mhm.
Because you're not really focused on it that much unless you need to actually get that re-inspected.
Right. That makes sense. I guess a lot of the maneuvers that you have to practice are there are things you need to know that you
Yep.
may not have to do all the time. But I guess when you get to do your cross country, it sounds like you do get a good taste of flying. It's kind of like sounds like a good mental checkpoint for me
Yep.
anyhow. So let's say you're I don't know, you can focus on either or instrument or commercial, but I kind of want to be a little specific, I guess. So maybe you'll answer however you like. I want to ask, let's say you're working with a student and you guys are prepping for a cross country flight. If you're breaking it down step by step, which you kind of did a little bit of a second ago, but if
Hmm.
you're breaking it down step by step for what you want them to get out of it,
Hmm.
what would you be telling them to focus on?
So, um, we did an instrument flight the other day.
Hmm.
We met up an hour before we were supposed to depart.
Hmm.
But I already told them before, hey, this is the plan route that we're probably going to do.
Hmm.
Go ahead, do your research on it, plan for it. Let's meet up an hour beforehand, talk about what we're actually gonna do, and
Did
then
you have
let's
to
go
have
do
him
it.
present like kind of what he thought?
Yeah, I asked
Or-
him. I just wanted to kind of see where he was at, what departure he would pick, and everything, and
Yeah.
then kind of walk him through like, hey, I agree with you, or hey, I would do this differently, and then tell him why I would do it. Right?
Right.
Not just kind of beat him down like, oh, why didn't you choose this one? But rather than just making it a teaching moment and say, hey, this route's probably better. They both work, but this one puts us closer, and the other one puts us way off track.
What kind of corrections did you have to give them?
I just kind of we had the file since he doesn't have his instrument rating
Mm.
um just yet. He's working on it.
Mhm.
So I filed for us, and
Mhm.
I kind of gave him what to expect,
Mhm.
and then walked him through. Hey, this we're not going to file the approach or the arrival, but we'll file the departure.
Mhm.
And kind of
Together.
just walked them through how to actual file it, because after you get your instrument rating, you can finally
Yeah.
file and pick up that actual file to go fly.
Oh, so that way you can file. And what do you mean by that? If you want to give me a little more specific, be a little more
So
specific. Yeah.
so when you're going on IFR flight plan,
Mhm.
you send out what you would like to do.
Mhm.
And so you'll send that through via ForeFlight,
Okay.
one
Okay.
800 WX brief, and so I did it through
Can you-
ForeFlight,
yeah.
and then the company gets it.
Mhm.
And so whenever I want to pick it up and actually go fly it, I
Mhm.
contact Addison Ground, and they gave us our route and our expectation for
Okay.
where we should go and how we should fly.
Okay, so after you guys meet for about an hour, you kind of get through some of the specifics, talk about the filings. It's maybe with that same student, anyways. What's next after that? I mean, you do the typical pre-flight, right?
Typical pre-flight,
Mhm.
walk through everything, make sure we have enough fuel, make sure we have everything that we're ready to go,
Mhm.
and then after that, make sure that we're us ourselves are good, and
Yeah,
we'll go on up.
you're in the plane, you're up. What are some of the specific checkpoints you're gonna have to go through? I know it depends on the different type of cross country you're doing, but in this situation for the instrument one, um, there's one during instrument.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So for the instrument cross country flight, like what are some of the main things that you're gonna want to touch on, and hit a certain kind of way, uh, on a cross country flight?
Departures.
Mm,
Really focus on departures, and then filing.
mm,
We really want to focus on filing,
mm,
and because the departure, like, we'll give the student a departure, and we'll play, uh, play like where, hey, you're actually picking up an IFR flight plan,
mm,
but because it's still a training flight, and
mhm.
because we're not going to go make this across country because we have other stuff to do,
Yeah,
it's like you don't actually get to fly a departure fully,
yeah.
versus here you can actually fly that departure all the way throughout,
Mm.
because we're actually going to that cross country airport.
And if you don't, maybe this is for me. Can you tell me a little more about how to fly a departure fully? Like, what do you mean by that?
So there's a plate,
Mhm,
and then there's the textual description. We must have the textual description in
mhm,
order to it. But it'll kind of show you, hey, there's these little fix that you must go to and
mm.
how to get there if ATC doesn't tell you to do.
Okay. And then so departures and the filing. After that, you fly and you
Mhm.
should know your landings pretty appropriately. And then you get another departure when you leave the other airport, right?
Yep.
Is there any like did you have a favorite cross country experience? Cuz I know you have some for different ratings, so I'm curious
Mhm.
about that.
Mine was probably the commercial one
Uh-huh.
because we went down to Austin.
Yeah.
Hey, go Longhorns.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Did you get to
But
spend some time down there when you did it?
we didn't. We
Okay.
spent it was kind of late.
Yeah.
Student wanted to get back. He had an
Yeah.
early flight the next morning, so we
Mhm.
stopped at 2-3 Romeo, got
Mhm.
got fuel there, and then did a touch and go at Austin, and then or yeah, did a touch and go,
Yeah.
and then went to Austin,
Mhm.
and then went back to Addison.
That's cool. Have you been to the is it the Austin airport? Which
Yep.
airport?
KAUS, the
KAUS.
actual Austin airport,
Okay.
and I've heard some people there's actually like a Boeing 737 or something landing right beside them because it's parallel runways.
That's crazy. Because what's the biggest plane we got landing in Addison? I don't
There's
even.
multiple citations.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, I've seen some
Yeah.
of the big planes we have over here, but
Yep.
I don't know anything about them. So, we're wrapping up the podcast. And I mean, you would say you're about 10, almost 11 months into this whole journey
Yep.
in aviation so far. Um, I mean, there's some difficulties getting here, right? You had to change your lifestyle a little bit. You had to maybe spend some money or take out some money. Uh, all the things you've done so far, maybe it's obvious. Was it worth it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
You got to spend money to make money.
yeah,
And think of it kind of as like an investment
hmm
going through. Hey, I know it's a lot,
hmm
but think about how much you're gonna end up making.
hmm
And so it's just one step closer after every rating.
Okay, gotcha. So you're saying so far, in time and money investment, totally worth it. Is it seeming more and more worth it? Is it scary at any point yet, or how you feeling?
I feel good.
Yeah,
Feel good about it.
yeah,
I don't really have any problems with
yeah.
it.
Okay,
The loan hits. I
yeah,
gotta start paying my loan off in February.
yeah,
So that's a little nerve wracking.
hmm
Just like any, it's another bill.
yeah.
But as the time comes, it's getting closer and closer to what my dream is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That sounds good. Well, I guess that's about all we have. I just like to hear CFIs tell me about how much they're liking what they're doing, especially when they're new into it. It's very different than being a student. It
Yep.
sounds like to me. But I do appreciate you, Nolan, for joining in on our 32nd episode of Pilot Say What. My name is Zach. Just in case I didn't say that earlier, we'll be here every week. If you've seen any episodes before and you've stayed this long through this one, then please give us a like, a subscribe, and maybe even a comment, especially if you have a question. We'd love to answer questions. And if you want to know anything else about flying, reach out to your local flight school. If you're anywhere in Conroe, Texas, Addison, Texas, or Denison, Texas, we have locations for you. We'll give you as many answers as you'd like, and you can decide to go from there. Otherwise, see you on the next episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say.